The midnight embalmer. They say death changes a man. I used to think that meant grief, guilt, reflection, the kind of change you learn from. I was wrong. Death doesn't change you, it strips you down. It peels back the mask of who you thought you were and shows you what's underneath. My name is Elliot. I worked at Barrow & Sons Funeral Home in Montgomery, Alabama for 6 years. I was the night embalmer. Not a glamorous job, but it paid well, and I had a knack for the still and the silent. I used to joke that the dead were easier to deal with than the living. That was before I found out some of them don't stay dead. The night it began was just like any other. A body had come in late. A John Doe picked up from the side of the highway. No ID, no wallet, no fingerprints in the system. Sheriff said the guy had that homeless look, like he'd been wandering for years. His face was pale and sunken, skin stretched like paper over brittle bones. He had deep gouges in his back, like he'd been whipped or clawed at, but oddly, no signs of blood loss. What made me uneasy was the smell. Even before I unzipped the body bag, there was a sour metallic tang that hung in the air. Not rot, something older, fouler. It clung to my nose, thick and cloying like spoiled meat left in the sun. I chalked it up to decomp, though the sheriff had said the body was fresh. I moved him to the prep table. Cold, lightless eyes stared up at the ceiling, mouth open as if caught mid-scream. His tongue was missing, not cut out, just gone. Whatever. I'd seen worse. I started the usual prep, cleaned the body, checked the arterial points, got ready to begin the embalming. But when I cut into his carotid artery, nothing came out. No blood, no pressure, just a dry hiss like a deflating balloon. I tried the femoral artery. Same result. He was empty. It should have stopped me, should have made me call someone. But I didn't. Maybe it was the hours. Maybe I was numb to it all by then. Maybe it was just ego, refusing to admit something was wrong. I pushed on, injected the embalming fluid anyway. I watched it swirl beneath his skin, pushing through veins that should have been dry. His body absorbed it, drank it up like a sponge. And then, his eyes moved, not wide, not blinking, just a twitch, a flicker. I froze. The room was silent but for the faint click of the embalming pump. I told myself it was a spasm. That happens. Post-mortem twitching, nothing to panic about. But then his lips moved, just barely, and he smiled. I dropped the needle. I locked the prep room and fled upstairs, told myself I was overtired, hallucinating, seeing patterns where there were none. I even laughed about it, nervously, alone in the office with the lights on. But I didn't go back down that night. The next morning, the body was gone. At first, I thought the day staff had moved it, but the transport log was empty. No one had been in the prep room after I left. I checked the CCTV. The camera feed had glitched. 4 hours of static between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. Then I noticed the door. The steel-reinforced prep room door had deep gouges in it. 4 parallel marks. Long, jagged scratches that had peeled the paint back to bare metal. I told the manager, old Mr. Barrow. He barely looked up from his newspaper. "Don't worry about it," he said. "Sometimes things go missing, especially them." He wouldn't elaborate. I should have quit, should have packed up and left that cursed place. But I didn't, because the dreams had started. I began waking up at odd hours, drenched in sweat, heart pounding. Always the same image burned into my mind. A dark corridor lined with coffins. One coffin always open, one body always missing. And in the corner of the room, crouched low and watching, him, the John Doe, eyes gleaming, mouth sewn shut, yet somehow grinning with cracked, bleeding gums. I stopped sleeping, and the smell, that smell, started following me home. 2 nights later, another body came in. This one a woman, no ID, no blood, same empty veins, same dry hiss, same unnatural grin. This time, I didn't even begin the embalming. I locked the door and called the police. By the time they arrived, the body was gone again. They found me babbling about missing blood and waking corpses and took me in for evaluation. I spent 72 hours under psychiatric watch. Diagnosis, acute stress disorder. They gave me pills, told me to rest. When I got home, my door was open. Not forced, not broken, unlocked. I hadn't left it that way. Inside, nothing was stolen, but everything was wrong. The chairs had been moved, the fridge was open, the TV was on, static. The smell was back, stronger than ever. And in my bedroom, etched into the wall in something thick and black, were 4 words. I see you, Elliot. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next. When I returned to the funeral home a week later, against every instinct in my body, I found the prep room cold and empty, no bodies, no records. Like the past week had never happened, but the floor was damp. A sticky trail led to the embalming table. I followed it and found the drain open. Inside the drain was a piece of skin, human, tattooed. My name was on it. I confronted Barrow. He didn't deny it, didn't even flinch. They don't like being preserved, he said simply. The embalming locks them in, binds them, but if you slip, if you cut wrong, inject wrong, hesitate, they wake up, they remember, and they come for you. He looked up at me, old eyes gleaming with something like pity. You've made them angry, Elliot. I left, never came back. That was 3 years ago. I've changed my name twice, moved states, taken jobs far from death or anything to do with it, but it hasn't helped. I still see him, sometimes in reflections, sometimes in crowds, always in dreams, and always smiling. I sleep with the lights on now. Haven't touched embalming fluid since that night. But sometimes, in the dark, I hear a hiss, like a needle pushing into dry, dead veins, and I know he's getting closer. They say your first job shapes the rest of your life. I just didn't expect mine to ruin it. My name is Ryan Tucker. I was 22 when I took a position as a funeral assistant at Elder Hollow Mortuary, a small family-run operation in upstate New York. It was the kind of job you take when you're broke, desperate, and willing to pretend you're okay being around dead people. I figured I'd just be moving coffins, dressing corpses, answering phones. I had no idea what I was walking into. The place was already strange from the outside. Tucked behind a forest of pines, it looked like something out of a forgotten century. Tall windows with stained glass, walls yellowed with age, an old bell tower that had long since stopped ringing. But what I remember most from that first day was the smell. You get used to the scent of death, they say, formaldehyde, decay, chemical cleanser. But this was something else, something sickly sweet, like spoiled honey. It sat thick in the air, and no amount of bleach ever cut through it. Mr. and Mrs. Eldridge, the owners, lived on site and ran the place themselves. He was silent, stone-faced. She was warm, but strange, always humming some tuneless melody under her breath. They didn't talk much, just gave instructions. I followed, and then came the rules. Rule number 1, never open the bottom freezer drawer. Rule number 2, do not speak to the girl, no matter what she says. Rule number 3, if you hear knocking after midnight, do not answer it. They told me the rules during my second week, just like that, no explanation. Like they were telling me where the fire exits were. I laughed, thinking it was some weird hazing ritual. They didn't laugh back. The funeral home had a body storage room in the basement. Industrial freezers stacked in rows, humming quietly in the dark. Each drawer held the recently deceased, tagged and zipped, awaiting service. Every night before leaving, I had to check the log and confirm that all drawers were sealed and properly chilled. I followed the checklist, drawer by drawer, until I reached the bottom right freezer. Drawer 17, the one I wasn't supposed to open. Of course I was curious. How could I not be? I stood there for 10 minutes that night, staring at the metal handle. My fingers itched. Every nerve in my body whispered, "Don't do it." And then, just as I turned to leave, I heard it. A voice. Software. Raspy. Barely a whisper. "Please, it's so cold." I froze. It had come from inside the drawer. I backed away slowly, heart hammering in my throat. Then I ran upstairs. The next morning, I found a sticky note on my locker. Do not make her promises. No name, no signature. Just that. I started dreaming about her. The girl. Pale skin, long black hair soaked in frost. Eyes like broken glass. She would speak in riddles, in fragments, always crying, always begging me to let her out. "I'm not dead. I'm just forgotten." I asked Mrs. Eldridge about it once. She went quiet. then said something I'll never forget. She died long ago, but not enough. One night, a storm knocked out the power. The backup generator kept the lights on, but the freezer shut down. Mr. Eldridge ordered me to do hourly checks until the repair crew could get there in the morning. Around 2 a.m., the temperature in the storage room started rising. I was halfway through checking drawer 11 when I heard it again. Knock, 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 3 knocks, coming from drawer 17. I backed away, hands trembling. The room was warm now, too warm. The cold that usually crept through the floor was gone. Then came her voice again, but this time louder. "You promised you'd help me." I hadn't, but part of me wanted to. I don't know why. Maybe it was pity, maybe madness, or maybe some part of her was still alive. I reached for the handle. Just as my hand touched it, the door behind me slammed shut. The light flickered, then went out. I was in total darkness, and something moved in the room. Not loudly, just a shift, a scrape, a dragging sound. I turned on my phone flashlight. The drawer was open 2 inches, and small, frostbitten fingers gripped the edge. I don't remember screaming. I just remember the next morning, Mr. Eldridge standing over me, his face pale with fury, shouting, "What did you tell her?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. They almost fired me, but they didn't. Instead, they changed the rules. New rule number 1, do not enter the basement after dark. New rule number 2, if you hear her voice, ignore it. New rule number 3, never say her name, especially not where she can hear you, but no one ever told me her name. That night, I packed my things. I tried to leave, but my car wouldn't start. And when I looked back at the house, there she was, standing in the attic window, her head tilted, long black hair matted with ice, lips pressed into a faint, shivering smile. I stayed 2 more weeks. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping to understand, to fix something. Maybe I was just scared of what would happen if I left wrong. Then one night, Mrs. Eldridge came to me. Her hands were shaking. "She's getting stronger," she whispered. "You opened it. Even a crack, that's all it takes." "What is she?" I asked, her eyes filled with tears. "Our daughter. They had lost her when she was 12, a drowning accident, but she didn't pass on. Something held her here, or worse, something else came back wearing her shape. They tried to bury her, but she came back. They froze her, hoping the cold would keep her still. It didn't. That was a year ago. I don't work there anymore. The Eldridges vanished last spring. Funeral home boarded up, left to rot. But sometimes, late at night, when the world goes quiet, I hear it again. Faint, distant, knock, 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 followed by a whisper, low and sorrowful. "It's so cold. Please, help me." And even now, I still dream of opening that drawer. And what's worse, in the dream, I do. I was the last person to see Judge Alistair Gray before they nailed the lid shut. I dressed him, combed his hair, even stitched his jaw closed. But 3 days later, I found him standing in my hallway, smiling and breathing. I've spent 42 years preparing the dead for burial. It's a quiet profession, thankless, mostly solitary. I don't complain. The dead don't talk back, and I've never had much use for the living anyway. My name is Emmett Holloway. I'm the undertaker of Breckenridge Parish, Louisiana, population 2,300. It's a dying town in every sense. The trains don't stop here anymore, the factories are long gone, and the church bell hasn't rung in over a decade. But people still die, and that means I still have work. Our funeral home was built in 1892 by my grandfather, back when men wore pocket watches and women still fainted at the sight of blood. The building's old, but it's held up. 2 floors, creaking hardwood, and a wrap-around porch that faces a weeping willow. Downstairs is the chapel and parlor. Upstairs is where I keep the bodies. I live in the attic, simple, controlled, predictable, until Judge Gray died. It was a Tuesday when they brought him in. Cold snap had hit the region, and the ground was stiff as stone. They say he died in his sleep. Heart attack. Peaceful. But something about him never sat right with me. For starters, the body was too fresh. Even after 12 hours, he was still warm. The skin had no pallor, no stiffness, no swelling. He looked like he might sit up and start shouting court orders at any moment. And then there were the eyes. I always shut the eyes first. It's the one thing that unnerves even seasoned mourners. But his wouldn't stay closed. No matter how many times I pressed them down, the lids fluttered open again. I eventually stitched them shut. It's an old trick, rarely used, but necessary. When I leaned close to thread the needle through his upper lid, I could swear, and I mean swear on my grave, that I felt his breath on my cheek. Warm, faint, like a sigh. I told myself it was a draft. This whole place always breathes with the wind. But I triple-checked the windows. Everything was sealed. Still, I went ahead with the process. I drained the blood, filled him with preservative, sewed every opening shut. I dressed him in a charcoal suit with a black silk tie. His face was serene, smooth, too smooth, almost like rubber. The mouth, though stitched closed, pulled faintly into a smile. That smile haunts me. The wake was scheduled for Thursday. I set the viewing room myself. Pale lilies, dim lights, soft organ music on a loop. The judge's wife, Eleanor, arrived first. She sat near the casket, not crying, just staring. Others trickled in, lawyers, church deacons, even the mayor. All paid respects. All said he looked like himself. But one woman, a quiet, wrinkled thing who sat at the very back, whispered something I'll never forget. He was already dead when he came back, she said. I turned to ask her what she meant, but she was gone. No one saw her come or leave. I didn't recognize her. That night, I stayed late to clean. Around 11 p.m., I went upstairs to check the body one last time before burial. I opened the casket, and Judge Gray's mouth was open, wide, stitches ripped clean. His lips were curled into a grin so wide it stretched to his ears. Teeth bared, eyes open, bloodless. My hands trembled. I looked for signs of tampering, no footprints, no marks, nothing. I resewed the mouth, adjusted the head, said a prayer I barely remembered, and then I heard it, thump, from the basement. I keep the furnace downstairs, the old cast-iron beast that creaks and groans and eats through firewood like candy. But this wasn't a groan, it was a thud, heavy, meaty, like someone had fallen or been dropped. I took the lantern, went down. The smell hit me first, sulfur and ash, like burning hair. Then came the sound again, thump. But when I turned the corner, the furnace was cold. No fire, no ashes, just the judge's shoes lying in front of it. Black leather, polished, empty. I staggered back upstairs, checked the casket. He was still there, still dressed, still dead. But this time, the eyes weren't just open. They were looking at me. The next morning, I locked the parlor and canceled the burial. I told Eleanor there was a problem with the preservation. She didn't ask questions, didn't even seem surprised. That afternoon, I dug through the town archives. Something had always bothered me about Judge Gray. The man was ancient, at least 90, but he never showed it. His face was smooth, his voice strong, his eyes sharp, and he'd been on the bench for over 50 years. No one had ever seen him age. I found his birth record, born 1873, which meant he would have been 149 years old. That wasn't possible. I thought maybe there was a mistake, until I found the photo. A black and white group portrait from 1912, Breck Ridge Town Hall. 6 men, all in suits, all labeled, and there, third from the left, was Judge Alistair Gray. Same face, same eyes, same smirk. He looked exactly the same, not similar, not resembling, the same. I looked for other records, marriage license, war drafts, court documents, and found a pattern. Judge Gray had died twice before, once in 1928, once in 1975. Each time a funeral was held, each time a closed casket. Each time a new man took the bench, with the same name, same face, same smile. I couldn't breathe. I returned to the mortuary just after dark. The windows were frosted, which was strange considering it was nearly 70 degrees outside. Inside, it was cold, too cold, and silent. The organ music was off, the air thick and still. I walked to the viewing room, opened the casket, empty. I dropped the lantern. It shattered, plunging the room into shadow. I turned, heart pounding, ears straining, and then, from behind me, I heard that low, familiar voice. "You stitched me up, Emmett." That wasn't very polite. I spun around, and there he was, standing at the doorway. No shoes, no breath, just that grin. "You've seen too much," he whispered. I ran, didn't look back, locked myself in the embalming room and waited for dawn. I haven't told anyone, not officially. Who would believe me? The obituary still ran, the town still mourned, but there was no burial, no casket, just an empty grave and a name on stone, Alistair Gray, 1873 to 2023. But last week I received a letter, no return address. Inside was a photo, newly printed, black and white, a courtroom, taken just days ago. And there, behind the bench, sits a man in a charcoal suit, same face, same eyes, same smile. Beneath it, typed in red ink, were 4 words, "Do not bury him." I burned the photo that same night, but it didn't matter. You can't unsee something like that. The eyes stay with you. I tried to go back to normal, told myself it was a trick of the light, a deep fake, a ghost from my own guilt. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw him behind the bench, those thin lips curling into a smile like he knew I was watching. And then the knocking started. At first it was faint, just a tap or two, always after midnight. I'd check the doors, the windows, nothing. Then it got louder, rhythmic, measured, 3 knocks, then silence, 3 more, then silence. I moved into the upstairs embalming room, kept a shotgun next to the gurney. I stopped sleeping altogether. My hands trembled so much I couldn't hold a scalpel without nicking the skin. I canceled all new services, told the parishioners the mortuary was undergoing repairs, but death doesn't wait for your nerves to settle. And on the 7th night, someone left a fresh body on my doorstep, wrapped in white linen, no coffin, no tag, just a body. A man I'd never seen before, middle-aged, gaunt, with a wide, unstitched smile on his face and 2 silver coins resting on his eyes. I froze. I hadn't handled a body in days, no appointments, no calls. I leaned down and lifted one of the coins. Underneath, the eyelid blinked. He was alive, but just barely. I brought him inside, laid him on the prep table, and called the sheriff. I didn't tell him everything, just that someone had dropped a man in distress at my door. The line rang. Once, twice. Then I heard a click, and a voice I hadn't heard since I was a child. "Your grandfather warned you, Emmett." I hung up. The man on the table was now staring at me, eyes glossy and unblinking. He opened his mouth, and out came a single word, raspy and wet. "Run." I didn't need more encouragement. I packed a bag, took only what I needed. I would leave Breckenridge for good, find a new place, a new name, burn the funeral home to the ground if I had to. But as I stepped outside, I saw the willow tree. It was weeping, not poetically, literally. Its bark was bleeding. A black, viscous sap poured down the trunk like tar. The grass beneath it was shriveled, and carved into the bark, so fresh it dripped, was a name. Holloway. My name. I drove south, no plan, no destination. I just drove. After 2 hours, I found myself pulling into an old roadside diner, the kind where the floors are sticky and the coffee tastes like smoke. I sat near the back, ordered something I didn't eat, and stared at the TV behind the counter. It was the news, local coverage, a story about Breckenridge. The anchor was smiling. Historic return to the bench this week as Judge Alistair Gray resumes court proceedings after a brief health scare. I dropped my mug, the screen cut to him, sitting behind the gavel, alive, smiling. The camera zoomed in, and for half a second, I swear to God, he looked right at me. I ran, out the diner, into the car, onto the road. But when I turned the key, the engine was already running. My headlights flicked on by themselves, and in the passenger seat, folded neatly, was my grandfather's journal. I never knew him well. He died when I was 10. Ran this mortuary for 50 years before me. Quiet man, carried something heavy in his eyes. Now I understood why. I flipped open the journal. Every page was a funeral, a death, a name, a ritual. And then about halfway through I saw it. Gray Alistair, December. 3/1928. Procedure incomplete. body rejected soil, emerged after 3 days. I kept reading. Attempted rebinding, failed, holy seal fractured, vessel cannot hold, no rest, not a man, not anymore. On the next page, recommendation, bind in silence. No name spoken, no mirror reflection, no open grave. And in the corner, hastily scrawled, the dead speak when you give them space. I drove back. I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed not to, but I couldn't leave it unfinished. This thing, whatever Judge Gray was, had slipped its leash, and the only man who ever bound him had failed, so it was my turn. I returned to the funeral home just before dawn. The town was silent, the trees still. The air thick with moisture, like the whole world was holding its breath. Inside, everything was just as I left it, except for the chapel. The coffin was back, center aisle, lid open, empty. I approached slowly, my breath visible in the cold air. The silence pressed in on me like a weight. At the base of the coffin was a note, typewritten, folded in half. I picked it up. It read, "You should have let me rest." The lights flickered. I turned toward the back hall and saw him, standing in the doorway, hair combed, tie perfect, eyes glowing faintly. "You're not the first," he said, voice deep and clear. "You won't be the last." I stepped back. He stepped forward. "Why do you keep coming back?" I asked. He smiled. "Because no one remembers the price of keeping me buried." Then he reached into his coat and pulled out something small and round, a silver coin, the same kind left on the man's eyes. He flicked it toward me. I didn't catch it. When it hit the ground, it rang like a bell. The sound shattered the air. The floorboards cracked. The coffin behind me exploded in a spray of wood and fire. The chapel went dark, and when I opened my eyes, I was somewhere else. The room was stone, ancient, lit by candles dripping wax onto a cold, wet floor. The walls were covered in names, thousands of names, scratched in with nails, knives, blood. At the far end stood a door, wooden, massive, chained shut, and something behind it was breathing, deep, slow, hungry. Then I saw the plaque, mounted above the door in tarnished bronze, Judge Gray's first burial. Bin Seki's yeux yet mishtokos and carved beneath it, in fresh gouges, not deep enough. A voice behind me. "He doesn't die, Emmett. He just changes suits." I turned. It was the old woman from the funeral, the one no one else saw. She stepped out of the dark, her face pale and stretched with age. "They've tried everything, fire, earth, salt. It only slows him down." "Then what does it take?" I asked. She looked at me, eyes hollow. "A living vessel, one that chooses." Then she held out a coin. "Bind him, Emmett, before he finds someone else." I woke up back in the chapel, lying beside the broken coffin. In my hand was the coin. The building groaned. Walls shifted. Something moved upstairs. I didn't have long. I opened my grandfather's journal again, flipped to the end. There, on the last page, was a ritual. Half finished, ink smeared by water, but legible enough. A coin, a mirror, a name, a burial alive. I set the stage, dragged an iron coffin into the embalming room, bolted it shut from the outside, filled it with grave dirt, bone ash, and salt. I lined the inside with mirrors. I knew he'd come, because I stopped running, because I was ready. And sure enough, just before dawn, he arrived, not through the door, through the wall. He stepped through the concrete like it was fog. "You think a box can stop me?" He laughed. "No," I said, "but your name can." I threw the coin. It landed inside the coffin. He froze. I spoke it, his true name, not Alistair Gray. But what came before the robes, before the rulings, before he put on the face of a man? The room screamed. He lunged, and I slammed the lid shut, bolted it, sealed it, buried it beneath the floor. I collapsed. When I woke up, the air was clean. The frost was gone. The willow tree outside was green again. No more knocking, no more voices, just silence. Real silence. That was 6 months ago. No one has seen Judge Gray since. No strange deaths, no whispers, but I keep the journal close, and every night I check the floor, because sometimes, just Barely. I hear scratching.